It's just so hard to believe that the PS5 is nearing its 4th year on the market. It really doesn't feel like it's been that long, but, this is usually about the halfway point for a generation. So I thought it was a perfect time to take a look at how Sony is faring with their exclusive lineup of games. A lot of people look at PlayStation as the brand, the place to play if you want the best blockbuster exclusives that the industry has to offer. And admittedly, even though this generation has been a little bit slow to start, there's still plenty of big games to play exclusively on the PlayStation 5. So today what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at 21 exclusives that the PlayStation 5 has to offer. Now, there are different types of exclusives, though. There's console exclusives and there's platform exclusives. So what I'm going to do is include the exact platform each game is available for. Now, with that said, let's jump right into it. So at number 21, I have Genshin Impact. This might be a free-to-play game, but that doesn't necessarily speak to its quality at all. This is absolutely one of the best free-to-play games available with a ton of content. Now, when it first came out, though, I remember there was a lot of accusations that it was just a Zelda Breath of the Wild clone. And I think when you look at it, you can easily make that mistake. The visuals definitely strike a resemblance, I'd have to say, but at the end of the day, it really proved that it's its own thing and that it can stand completely on its own. It's a fun game, and it even has a rather interesting story to tell. Now, do note, though, that this is a gacha style of game, so they will try to get their money's worth through different transactions, but again, it is free to play, so that's kind of to be expected. Number 20, Rise of the Ronin. This is Team Ninja's newest game, and they've always really excelled at combat-specific games, but Rise of the Ronin, it's a little bit different because it takes some of their more recent combat systems and it puts it into an open-world style of game. I mean, it sounds fantastic on paper, and in a lot of ways, I'd say that it absolutely is. But admittedly, it's also a flawed experience. The combat, as expected, is a lot of fun, but the world itself and all of the different mechanics that they throw at you is not perfectly executed, and I think the visuals do leave something to be desired as well, especially when you compare it to another unnamed open world game that we might talk about later that's also set in feudal Japan. Now, if you haven't played any of Team Ninja's recent games, though, they're kind of Souls-like, but with their own identity. So, more or less, I'd say that Rise of the Ronin is an open-world game set in feudal Japan with a Souls-like combat system. It might not necessarily be perfect, but there's also things to like about Rise of the Ronin, and if its theme sounds interesting to you, then you might like Rise of the Ronin. At number 19, here I have Granblue Fantasy Relink, which is a really interesting JRPG. I think in a lot of ways it might not be what you would expect from this genre. Its story is fun, but it's not necessarily a major emphasis like a lot of other JRPGs, and you can complete it in about 10 or so hours. Now, there's still a lot of other stuff to do in the endgame, though, and that's really where Granblue separates itself. It's often compared to the Monster Hunter series in the sense that you're constantly grinding and progressing. But instead of leveling up weapons, you'll instead level up characters, all of which have completely unique combat styles. So you can honestly put a ton of time into Granblue, and if you like hack and slash games that can offer a challenge at times, then I'd say Granblue is worth a try. And plus, it's also a very good-looking game at that. I really like its art style. Number 18, Neo Collection. Now, there's been a lot of companies that's attempted their own version at a Souls-like experience, but very few feel like they can go toe-to-toe with FromSoft and the Soulsborne series. The Neo Collection, however, is one such exception. It offers a deep and rewarding combat system that's driven by loot. This really kind of gives it its own identity, and as you'd expect, it's more than a little bit challenging. Now, technically, these games first released on a PlayStation 4, but with the Neo Collection, you get both games plus all of their DLC as native PlayStation 5 versions with improved visuals and performance up to 120 frames per second. It also improves majorly on those long load times thanks to PlayStation 5's SSD. So if anything else, this is quite the bargain deal for a collection like this. Number 17, The Last of Us Part 1. Now, when The Last of Us Part 1 first came out, there was a lot of controversy because whether or not this game needed a remake can definitely be up for debate, and its launch price was also a little bit high for what it is. As time has gone on, though, you can now find The Last of Us Part 1 at a more affordable price, and it is still one of the best story-driven games ever made, hands down. The bond between Joel and Ellie is one of the most memorable duos in all of gaming, and it's just an emotional roller coaster of a game. If you haven't already experienced its story, you absolutely need to try this game. It does such a good job at portraying this morally gray area, and you're constantly going to question the things that the protagonist chooses to do. It's also probably one of the more unique games within the zombie genre. It attempts to be a little bit more realistic with this brutal world, and it brings it to life with an intimate combat system. If anything else, I'd say The Last of Us remains as an all-time great single-player game. Number 16, Sackboy: A Big Adventure. Little Big Planet has really been one of PlayStation's most iconic mascots since the PS3 days. I've always loved this series for its charm and creativity. And, well, it's back once again, but this time with a brand new take for the series. For the first time ever, Sackboy goes on a 3D adventure, and it actually turned out very well. It really translated what we love about Little Big Planet and incorporates that into a 3D platformer. It's highly creative, it's extremely charming, and it constantly gives you new gadgets to keep the gameplay fresh. On top of that, this is also among the best cooperative experiences available on the PS5. It supports up to 4 players, and for that reason, I think it's one of the better games that you can pick up for the entire family, as this is a game that both adults and kids can enjoy. Number 15, Death Stranding Director's Cut. Now, Death Stranding originally released on the PlayStation 4, but the Director's Cut comes with better visuals at 60 frames per second, plus several new additions, including some stealth-like missions that will take Hideo Kojima fans back to the days of Metal Gear Solid. Now, outside of that, though, this is still a very different game than what you might expect from Kojima. It can almost be described as an extreme walking simulator where you play as a futuristic mailman who has to deliver items in one of the most harsh environments that you can think of. So, when it comes to its gameplay, I will say that it is divisive. Not everybody enjoys how slow-paced this game is at times and how isolated it makes you feel. But I'd also say that that's ironically one of its strong suits. It's very atmospheric, and it's easy to get lost into its stunning and mesmerizing world. Hideo Kojima really brought this game to life with one of the more interesting worlds in all of video games. It's got a really interesting, albeit bizarre story, which I'd say that's kind of expected for Kojima. It's got memorable characters, and again, it's definitely not for everybody. But if you stick with it, it does have a lot to offer, and that only makes me more excited for its eventual sequel. Number 14, Returnal. Now, Housemarque has always been known for their arcade-like experiences, but Returnal, this is their first attempt at a AAA blockbuster experience, albeit they still brought that arcade-like feel to its gameplay. You're constantly going to be dancing around, dodging a barrage of incoming attacks, and it just turned out to be a great, fun combination. Though I will say that this game can be difficult. It is a roguelike action-adventure game, and you don't necessarily see a lot of that when it comes to AAA games like this that also attempts to tell a good story. But hey, I'd also say that's one of the reasons that Returnal stands out. Of course, though, being a roguelike, if you die, of course, you're going to have to restart from the beginning. And I know that's intimidating for some people, but it will get easier over time. And because it's just so much fun to play, you're constantly going to come back for more. Number 13, Gran Turismo 7. Now, last generation, I felt like Gran Turismo took a step back as they experimented more with the multiplayer side of things, which, hey, that's fine and everything, but GT7 brought the series back to its roots in a grand way. The King of Racers is officially back with license challenges and everything that you come to expect from the historic racing simulation franchise. Now, of course, there's also multiplayer as well, so you're really going to get the best of both worlds, but as of today, I'd say that Gran Turismo 7 is arguably the best racing game available on the PS5, if not even more than that. Number 12, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. I've always really loved the Ratchet series, and Rift Apart really took the visuals to the next level. This game looks insane for what it is. Like, just true Pixar visuals for a game. So kudos to Insomniac for that, but as always, it's really just a joy to go through its world, especially with all the over-the-top weapons that they give you. I mean, it's never just about simply beating your enemies. No. It's so much more than that, because instead, it always emphasizes beating them in the most fun way possible, because you'll have plenty of options. Now, it also has collectathon elements, so it really is a joy to explore its world and to uncover its many, many secrets. The one big difference from this game compared to previous entries, though, is its dimensional rifts that you can use as a way to teleport yourself. I don't know if it's necessarily as groundbreaking as Sony originally claimed it was, but what I can say is that it's a really cool and fun feature to play around with. Number 11, Stellar Blade. There's been some, I'm going to just say, weird controversy around Stellar Blade, but you know what? Looking beyond all of that, this really is a good action game. You might not necessarily expect it at first, but this is a Souls-like experience that really emphasizes a fun but fair challenge. Now, you can choose your own difficulty, so you can tailor-make it to your liking a little bit more compared to other games within this genre. But either way, the combat is top tier. Like, the movement feels so good in this game, and it allows you to play how you want. If you want to be reckless and go in ham, you can try to do that, or you can take that more methodical, slow approach that we've seen in Dark Souls games in the past. Either which way, it's a lot of fun, and the visuals are also just excellent, and it even has an interesting story. So far, I think this is actually one of the better new IP for this generation, and right now, it's only available for the PlayStation 5. Number 10, Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut. Much like Death Stranding Director's Cut, this is an upgraded version for Ghost of Tsushima with some extra content, including Iki Island. I almost feel like in some ways that this is the game that Assassin's Creed fans have been waiting for well over a decade. A game set in feudal Japan, but dare I say, I don't think Ubisoft will be able to top Ghost of Tsushima and what Sucker Punch has done with this game. It really is that good, and one of the reasons is because it offers players the option to play the way that they want to. Do you want to be a true honorable samurai and just go face to face against your enemies, or are you going to take a more stealthy approach? This element ties directly into its story, and that's something about Ghost of Tsushima. It really feels like they crafted a world and story that lives specifically through its gameplay. I can't think of a lot of games that has done that, and especially not as good as Ghost of Tsushima. Number 9, Uncharted Legacy Collection. Now, Uncharted is actually a top 3 series for me of all time, so I could have easily put this one much higher on the list, but I went ahead and decided to keep it at number 9 simply because at the end of the day, it is still a remaster. But man, I have to say, it is a really, really good remaster. Like honestly, after all of these years, these are still some of the best looking games even on the PlayStation 5. And they now run at a buttery smooth 60 frames per second. So, I mean, it's honestly amazing what Naughty Dog achieved with the Uncharted series, especially Uncharted 4, which is still one of the best stories ever for any video game. I just love the characters so much in this series, and Uncharted 4 really was the perfect end for Nathan Drake in his story. It was just so beautifully crafted, and even though I want an Uncharted 5, I honestly don't know if we'll ever see a continuation and an end that feels as perfect as it did in Uncharted 4. Even better here, though, is that you can also play the entire Uncharted series on a PlayStation 5 thanks to the Uncharted collection that they released last generation for the PlayStation 4. So you will get the definitive Uncharted experience on the PlayStation 5, and even if you've already played them, they still hold up incredibly well. I cannot recommend the Uncharted series enough. It truly is a special franchise. Number 8, Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 has probably been one of the most fun surprises from PlayStation this generation thus far. It really took the gaming world by storm with its fun gameplay that emphasizes teamwork. This is an online cooperative shooter where you fight off waves of relentless enemies, and I mean absolutely relentless. And this all is while working together to complete a series of goals until you can escape the planet by aircraft. It sounds simple on the surface, but the way they emphasize teamwork in Helldivers 2 is quite unique, and it can really make it a very challenging experience at times. You will absolutely need to communicate and work well together if you want to have any chance at surviving. So if anything else, I'd say this game is extremely fun, and if you have some friends who want to play something together, then Helldivers 2 is an easy recommend. Number 7, the Spider-Man series. Now, Spider-Man 2 is one of the flagship exclusives for the PS5, and I'd say right away from a gameplay standpoint, this game is excellent, to put it short. It really took the original 2017 formula that everybody loves so much, and it somehow managed to improve on that even more. Its combat is just so fun, and in typical Insomniac fashion, just like the Ratchet & Clank series, you have various gadgets and abilities which makes you feel like a true superhero. Spider-Man also has one of the best traversal systems in all of gaming as well, because you can swing around or now glide across the city. It's one of the only open world games available that I never felt the need to fast travel because it's just so fun and it's really fast to explore yourself. Now, the story, though, I don't think that it was quite on par with Spider-Man 2017. There are certain things that I like about it, and I think it's an overall enjoyable story. But here's the thing. You can also play the entire series on the PlayStation 5 with native versions. They, in fact, did remaster the original Spider-Man, and you can also play Miles Morales on the PS5. So as a series, I really think that this is one of the best that you can currently play on the PlayStation 5. Number 6, Horizon Forbidden West. Horizon, in my opinion, really has one of the best settings in all of gaming. It's just so unique and stands out with its prehistoric theme that combines futuristic elements, and it really comes to life through its stunning visuals. I mean, graphically, there's not really many games out there that looks as good as Horizon Forbidden West does, which is amazing when you think about it, considering this is a full-fledged open world game. It's just kind of like, wow, how did they manage to make an open world game that looks this good? But it truly does. It's not just the visuals, though. It's also just a really good game. It has a massive world to explore. I like the combat, and there's plenty of things to do throughout its story and its side quest. For that matter, I think Forbidden West is a major improvement over the original, especially in terms of its combat. Now, I will say, though, when it comes to its story, it does take a little while before it gets going just because Aloy is a little hard-headed early on, but eventually, once she starts to settle in a little bit more, I think there's a really good story here as well. Now, one thing to note here, though, is that even though you can play the base game on the PlayStation 4, you can only play its DLC, The Burning Shores, on the PlayStation 5 and on PC. Number 5, and I've been saying this for years, that Astro's Playroom is secretly one of the best PS5 games, which is crazy to think about because it's a free game that comes included with every PlayStation 5. And let me tell you this right now, absolutely do not skip out on this game. This is an essential PlayStation experience that showcases the PS5's controller's capabilities in some of the most fun ways possible. There's still not a game that's done it better. And the thing is now we have a full-fledged Astrobot game to look forward to. So while Astro's Playroom was a fun, bite-sized game, Sony took that and they gave Team Asobi an even bigger budget to make an even bigger and better game. I cannot wait to get my hands on that game and see how they've expanded one of the best 3D platformers ever made. And if you've been a big part of PlayStation's history, Astro is jam-packed with nostalgia around every corner. You're going to see a lot of iconic PlayStation characters and callbacks in these games. I mean, there's just so much love and attention poured into Astro, and I really just hope that we see more games like this in the future from PlayStation. We need more of these type of games because they are just a pure joy to play. Number 4, Final Fantasy 16. There's really only a few select games that resonates with me in such a profound way that when I finish it, I know that it's a game that I'm going to cherish and remember for years and years to come, and that's really what Final Fantasy 16 is to me. Yes, I do understand that it's more of an action experience than it is an RPG, which is polarizing for the Final Fantasy fan base, and as someone who has played the majority of Final Fantasy games, I completely understand that. I really do. But at the same time, I still think that Final Fantasy 16 is incredibly fun, and I just love its characters, its world, its story, and the direction they took with its more mature approach. By the time I reached the end credits, I was blown away, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I immediately scavenged the internet to find out more. Now, with all that said, admittedly, I will say that Final Fantasy XVI's performance isn't necessarily the best. Visually, it's stunning, but this is basically a 30 FPS game, which I think is important to know, especially if you have an OLED TV like myself. 30 FPS on an OLED TV just does not feel all that great. So if there was ever a game that needs a PS5 Pro to fix performance, I'd say this one here tops the list. Number 3, God of War Ragnarok. If the PlayStation brand had a face, I mean, that would have to be Kratos in God of War. This has been such an iconic franchise for them since the PlayStation 2 days. And what's kind of crazy about that is that they somehow recreated it, and you can argue that they made it even better. Now, that kind of depends on your preference, but they somehow took one of the most angry characters in all of gaming, a god killer, the God of War, and they turned him into a sympathetic character with a kid, the Dad of War. Very few popular franchises can reboot themselves successfully in quite the way God of War did and still remain successful. I mean, I'll say this personally. The original trilogy was already great as is. But for me, I do prefer the newer games because it combines fresh new gameplay with some of the most memorable stories in gaming. And Ragnarok, for the most part, completes its Norse tale and adds even more gameplay elements, with his son taking his next step forward. Number 2, Final Fantasy VII Intergrade and Rebirth. One of the greatest games ever made is quickly becoming one of the best trilogies ever made. Final Fantasy VII Remake, Intergrade, and Rebirth vastly expands on the original experience in both nostalgic and also surprising ways. These aren't necessarily one-to-one remakes. I'd actually say that they're sequels in disguise, but they do still manage to keep the essence of what made the original so special in the first place. Its fully realized creative world, its memorable story, its cast of characters, which are still some of my favorites of all time, and I think all of this combined makes it really one of the best experiences in any type of media, not just for gaming, but just really any type of media. And they somehow expanded all of that in these remakes in a meaningful way. I mean, the original game was already one of my all-time favorites, but you can really feel the love and care that went into making these remakes. And I just don't think that there's many pieces of media that compares to the Final Fantasy VII experience. It really is just that special. And once again, we get to see that in Rebirth with its open world. Now, I will say, I still need to play the third game to really get a sense as to how it compares to the perfection that was the original. That's the only reason I'm not going to put it in my number 1 spot, because I need to see that third one first. But so far, it's been a wild but fun ride for the first 2 remakes. These are just amazing, amazing games. And at the number 1 spot, and is my surprise to people, when I have Demon's Souls. I really just love this game. The original that released on the PlayStation 3 back in 2007 was my first experience with a FromSoft Souls-like game. And ever since then, it's really been one of my most fond memories in gaming. To this day, I remember just how excited I was when they announced this game was coming over to the West, and I had to get my hands on it when it launched. Unfortunately, though, this being the first of its kind, a lot of people missed out on it. And that's another reason that I'm so glad that they remade it. Not just because I got to relive that experience, but also for all the other people that missed out on that first experience. With each passing year, it just seems like more and more people fall in love with the FromSoft games. And even though not as many people played this one, the Demon's Souls remake is top tier, just like all of the rest of their games. Though I will say, unlike other FromSoft games, Demon's Souls has each world split up into a more linear fashion. Now, you can still freely visit each location in mostly any order that you want, but each world is just so perfectly designed. So when you combine that with its excellent visuals and its challenging combat, I really just think that this is a special experience, and it's easily one of the best games that you can play on the PlayStation 5. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this list. And if you do like this type of content, do make sure to hit that subscribe button because there's going to be plenty more lists just like this in the future. But until next time, peace out.